Hi, Christopher. Welcome to Better Boundaries Online. And for anybody that doesn't know your story, could you just start by introducing yourself, who you are today, and a little bit about your journey and what drove you to act in porn as Danny Wylde?
Yeah, my name's Christopher Zeischegg, now 40 years old. Started working in the porn industry when I was 19, so this was quite a long time ago. Under the name, yeah, Danny Wylde. I did that for 8 years, and then I retired pretty suddenly overnight and continued to work kind of in the behind the scenes of the industry for a number of years until I was able to transition out. Why did I start? I mean, that's a complicated question. It's hard for me to 100% remember, but I was in school, probably both looking for sexual experiences that were outside the norm, and I needed money, and I don't know. There's a lot of, I mean, part of it probably was just the idea that it was a little bit wrong, and that sounded like, at age 19, probably something I was interested in pushing. But I didn't want to be like a porn star or anything. It was more like I thought this would be like a weird experience to tell my friends, and just to have in life. And then, yeah, I ended up falling in love with a fellow porn performer and moving to Los Angeles to be closer to her. And then, this became more and more of my life and helped me get through school. And then at this point, think I made a kind of dumb decision to stay in after I graduated, for a while. I don't think that was quite good for me, but, I got out eventually.
Okay, so how long were you active in industry and what roles did you primarily take on?
Well, for 8 years, I was just a performer, meaning like I would do sex scenes. I mean, porn star. I don't know if I was a star, but like I was in a lot of movies and scenes, and that was, yeah. So 8 years, and then when I quit, it was kind of like a medical emergency. I didn't know what to do. Most of the people I knew were in the porn industry, and I had gone to film school, so I ended up taking on a variety of jobs, but the one that stuck the longest is I was kind of like a content manager for James Dean, who at that time was probably like the biggest male performer in the world. And then I did a lot of things on set. A friend of mine was also trying to get out of the industry, and he was a photographer slash videographer. And so what we ended up doing is we still were making a lot of our money making adult films, and I would help him out on set. But then we would spend a lot of our time doing like small commercial productions until we got enough clientele to move out.
What was a typical day on set like for you? Can you describe a little bit of the routine or any unexpected pressures that aren't kind of shown in the final product?
Yeah, I mean, for men, I think the thing that I don't know how many people know this, but an average day on set is it can change drastically. I mean, some of them are incredibly short and easy, where you call these kind of like gonzo scenes, or just scenes where there's only sex, there's no real story, and they can shoot it more or less for the duration you see on screen. But some days it's like a feature and you can be there 16 plus hours. The thing with men, and probably ties most into my stories, I would say at the very least 99% of men are taking in porn, or on like studio porn, are taking erectile dysfunction medication. I think that's gotten even worse from the point of view of like it used to just be pills, and the reason I ended up quitting is because that kind of stopped working for me, and I was using an injection. It's something called Binix, and I'm not on set these days, so I can't say this from firsthand experience, but I do have friends still in the industry, and it seems like most of the younger guys are now injecting. I knew that was really, really common in gay porn. The problem is, and the reason I quit is I had ended up in the emergency room for about 3 times, 4 times over the course of my career. Finally, the doctor said to me, I was 28 years old, he said to me, "You keep doing this, you're going to build up scar tissue in the side of your penis, and you won't be able to get an erection, period, at least naturally." Thought to myself, this was not my goal in life to be doing this. This is just the way I make money, but this is not worth it. So I quit that day, but I don't think you don't make as much money as I think people think, or I don't know, a few do, kind of like most things on the internet. there are probably a handful of people who do really well, and the rest of them are kind of like, lower middle class or whatever. So I had not really saved anything, and this was the reason I kept working in the industry because I didn't know anyone else.
That's that's quite intense and heavy, and I'm sorry that you had to experience all of that. That must have been pretty emotionally and mentally intense for you.
Yeah, it was not my favorite time of life, but I think ultimately I'm quite grateful it happened. Otherwise, I think it would have been much more difficult for me to step away.
And what are some other hidden truths about the adult industry that the public doesn't see? Any unsafe practices behind the cameras? Any exploitation or coercion?
I don't have as much experience with something like explicit trafficking or coercion in the sense that, like, the cartoon version of that where someone is like, you do this or we'll beat you up or something. I think it's a lot more subtle than that. My biggest thing at this point is I used to actually participate quite a bit in pro porn advocacy in my 20s. My point of view has switched pretty drastically because I've kept in contact with a lot of people, and I don't speak about this that much because all of my experience is anecdotal. I can't say like there's a lot of research around this, but um everyone, aside from maybe two or three people I've spoken to, everyone who I know from that part of my life, 10, 15 years later, all have some form of like PTSD or trauma related to their work, explicitly to their work. I do know a very small percentage of people who I think have been able to work through that and stay in the industry. And I think that just goes, in my opinion, that just means like, people are able to thrive in a number of circumstances that are difficult. I mean, and if you can create enough of a work-life balance, the people I'm talking about, they were really smart with their money and ended up creating kind of a studio for themselves. So they're not working every day. And I think that is the way they're able to live kind of healthily. Everyone else is like, screw this part of my life. I don't want anything to do with it. And I think for me,
Having to go and get trauma release therapies and work on their stuff, or
I mean, I think people deal with it in a number of ways. I am not having as deep of conversations with everyone to find out like,
yeah.
what exactly they're doing. I ended up having to go through quite a bit of therapy because I think many years later, during COVID, was the first time that I had no day-to-day experience with it. And so coming out of that, I was asked again just to be on set or to edit movies and so forth. And I had this incredibly intense PTSD experience just editing it, and my body kind of just started shaking and I started crying and was like extremely angry. It was basically, I was working for a company that I had a good relationship actually with the directors and producers, but it was one of these things that, and this is probably going to go to your point around coercion or things like this. So on set, things can go wrong, right? And I understand what that looks like, having been on, and it's not like it's necessarily someone's being malicious, but I'll explain what happened. So I was editing this scene, and it's an anal scene, and it's like a BDSM thing. So the woman is tied up, and from a legal point of view, I think everyone had agreed to be there and signed paperwork and everything. And, I think that's kind of the argument for most pornography is like, well, everyone has, or I don't know, at least in mainstream US porn, everyone has agreed to be there. But then it's like, I see this woman's ass starts bleeding. She's in pain. They put the camera down, obviously, because they're going to address this. And I don't know what happened in between that. But I've been on quite a few sets where something goes wrong like that. And immediately it's like, for anyone to make money, we have to finish. And I think like, on any other traditional film set, I mean, that makes a certain degree of sense. People get little injuries or something goes wrong, and there's so much money invested that you have to finish your day. And so in the past, I was like, well, you just push that over to sex. Everyone kind of knows what they're on board for. But I don't know, to me, sex is different. I mean, this has a little bit more of a really intense emotional consequences if you go through something where, especially in more violent or BDSM oriented scenes. I mean, I remembered my own experience in my early 20s when I used to do like be a bottom or whatever. So they would tie me up and do similar things. There is often a situation where you're asked to do something you're not comfortable with, and they say, oh, just a little bit more of this, and and then oftentimes what we end up having to do is film people at the end of that to get their recorded consent. But there's a lot of gray area there where you're just like, yeah, I'm going to say whatever because I want to get my fucking paycheck and get out of here, and I'm not going to cause trouble. And a lot of people have an agent and all this stuff. I mean, it flows uphill or downhill or whatever. You're fucking with a lot of different people's money, and you don't want to be made out to be the bad guy because like you're like, no, I don't want to be hung from the ceiling and fucked up the ass for another 5 minutes. This really hurts, or
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think with porn, the viewers don't see a lot of the lubrication, certain things, with the anal sphincters, you've got internal and external muscles and involuntary and voluntary muscles. So it's a very delicate area. And what scares me is that young people see a lot of this stuff and they don't know how to prepare properly. Accidents like you were just describing with that girl, anal fissures, I hear they're quite rife in the porn industry.
Yeah, I mean, percent. And yes, I think what you're saying, a lot of this stuff around lubrication and I mean, on an average anal scene in a porn scene, yeah, a girl is in her makeup chair with like a butt plug in for an hour before she gets on set. There's a lot of stopping for lube. And I would say there are a lot of people who are trying to make it as safe as possible. But I think it's certainly when you're getting into more extreme acts or more like violent stuff, I mean, more stuff goes wrong. And I've been on a lot of sets where like I know the performer doesn't want to be there anymore. I mean, I used to do these gangbangs up at kink.com, and I mean, it's another stuff when I think back, it's like, it just all felt normal at the time. But like, we had a director who was like, was very known for having a heroin addiction. I mean, she's the one responsible for the safety of these people, and this woman is like fucking loaded out of her mind. And because she's a woman, she would often play these sort of like, well, you can trust me, I'm also a girl, like, type of thing. It was kind of like this pseudo-feminist bullshit that I think pushed girls to be in situations they were certainly not comfortable with. I always kind of didn't put any blame on myself, but I would feel really weird, and a lot of this was because it's like, who's in charge? Who's supposed to stop this? I'm just doing my job also. I don't know. And again, in a yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I was supposed to do, I guess. Yeah. But I didn't do
I
anything.
think what you've just described, it was kind of the blind leading the blind, really, wasn't it? You were young, you were learning about lots of things, you were wanting to have good experiences, but you were seeing things that didn't feel kind of right, but you didn't feel like maybe you were in the place to stand up or step forward or do anything about that. I mean, yeah, what I'm kind of thinking, do you know any female actors that have had to get out or rebel because they couldn't cope with some of the things that they've had to do or come out of set?
Again, I mean, here's kind of my experience with this and why I just don't talk about it that often.
Yeah.
I think if you're in it, this was certainly my experience. I think it's hard for people to look at themselves and be like, I'm bad or I'm doing something bad. You sort of have to advocate for yourself. And so I think a lot of the like, I'm empowered speech that comes from people in sex work, especially in like left-wing circles for the past 10, 20 years, is there's a certain energy or whatever that comes from being young and attractive and people are paying you for sex. And I think on a certain superficial level, that feels really good for a short period of time. We're talking about people who have not been coerced or trafficked explicitly into doing this, which I think is a lot of people, especially these days when we have even more things that I'm not really aware of how they work, like OnlyFans. In theory, people are agreeing to do this and are doing it of their own volition, and in some rare cases are actually making a lot of money. But it's like the the other side of that is I don't even know the statistics around this, but I know quite a few people who have killed themselves. I mean, and also I want to point this out. It's like there's a lot of advocacy groups speaking about women, and I think women's issues are more well known around sex work stuff. But just like literally Google something like gay men suicide rates in porn or something like
Yeah,
that.
I
There's
give a lot of those.
nothing. It's like,
Yeah, I give a lot of those stats out in when I give my talks.
and I don't think that's coincidental. I mean, again, I don't want to tell other people's stories, but I'm close with a guy who still works in the industry, and he was like a browser's contract star for a few years. I mean, from an outsider perspective, you talk to a lot of straight men. Oh, that's my dream job. You just get to have sex with beautiful women all the time. And I spoke to, he was like, I wanted to kill myself every day. Like, it was just so, and it's not like my experience was all every single day was horrible, but when it is horrible and it's on a regular basis, I mean, I think you just have to ask yourself, like, what is the point of sexuality? You know, of course, most young people at a certain point, it sounds like a great idea to sleep with everyone. And I think it's probably even different. Maybe if you were promiscuous in college or something, maybe you could have had a really great experience. I think anyone that I speak to who works more than 1 to 3 years in the adult industry, you just fucks you up, like bar none. And I don't know. It's like it's a very sensitive subject, but I don't know where that transition
And
begins and ends, you know?
you've said that there's certain things that you don't feel proud of and have made you look at yourself, reflect. But how have those experiences shaped your self-image and relationships outside of work and your life outside?
Well, and I got divorced a couple of years ago, 2024, so it's not been that long. I mean, my ex-wife sort of, I think, weaponized this to sort of cheat on me, more or less. I think that's more common in the reverse. You hear a lot of women in the porn industry will get in relationships with men will be like, well, you do this or you used to do this so you can understand why I'm going to go off and fuck all these other people. You should understand or something. I mean, that's kind of like a mild example, but that's a pretty normal. I mean, this has happened to me now. So, uh, I think from a really basic perspective, it was impossible for me in the middle of the porn industry and shortly after to have relationships with anyone. I was not also a sex worker. I think that again, this is probably more common for women, but it's true of every male sex worker I've spoken to. If you meet a woman or man or whatever who's interested in you and knows who you are, the idea that you're seen as kind of like a novelty or a sort of like a sexualized thing is extremely common. I think I've had stalkers who are primarily actually women in my last relationship who show up literally at my house looking for me, like thought they were in love with me, all this shit. It's like, I don't think it's negatively affected my actual sexual interaction with partners, other than what I just said. Like if it's someone I had like hooked up with a few people in my early 30s who I think had just been fans of mine, and I wasn't really conscious of that, and then like went into this delusional thing of I don't know. It gets kind of scary. And I think probably for women on the other end of that, if there was someone who is stronger than them, that can be problematic and lead to sexual assault issues. I think just because I'm a man and was with women who are probably physically less strong than me, I wasn't as worried about that. But it's like, yeah, this woman showed up totally, I don't know, on some substance. She was very inebriated. Came to my house, was searching for my wife. She said in court. Uh,
In court? Wow.
I mean,
Okay.
I had to get a restraining order.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's yeah.
Yeah. So these are a lot of things that people won't even think about are happening behind the scenes for all sorts of people. And what with the physically some of the things you've shared already, but what about STIs? Do they have regular testing? Have you seen things go wrong in that area?
Yeah, I mean, there is very regular testing. If you get in porn, you will get chlamydia, gonorrhea, herpes. I don't know anyone who doesn't have herpes who works in adult, but I mean, that's also pretty common just in regular sexually active communities. But yeah, I mean, thankfully, like you catch it typically pretty quickly. I mean, I think the worst thing I got was syphilis, but because we were testing every 2 weeks, in theory, they're supposed to shut down the industry temporarily in the United States, at least when there's something like an HIV outbreak or syphilis or something serious like that. With chlamydia and gonorrhea, you have to go. I mean, you have to take medication, but they don't like shut it down necessarily because it's relatively treatable. I mean, I think there are becoming like antibiotic resistant strains of chlamydia and gonorrhea, right? I don't have enough information to say how prevalent that is, especially like industry wide. But if you test positive, you're not allowed to shoot. However, there were a few like weird situations when I was in the industry where people were financially desperate and so faked a test with like Hep C or something. They were eventually basically kicked out of the industry, but they did pass it on to a couple people. HIV is, less common among straight people, or at least, men and women who have sex with men and women exclusively. The big rift in the industry when I was around. This is sort of changed from my understanding. It was a little bit of like, is this homophobic or not? But basically, gay porn didn't test, but they required condoms. Straight porn tested, but for the most part did not require condoms. So it was like if you were a guy and you did gay porn, there's quite a bit of stigma against you also performing in straight porn. And the reason was because people thought you were like an HIV risk. With the advent of PrEP and different drugs like that, a certain degree of the population, I think, is just on PrEP. And so I don't know. I mean, there's a few guys, I think, these days, at least a few years ago when I was still in the know, kind of doing both. But yeah, I don't know. I think that I remember at least 10, 15 years ago, there were probably HIV positive guys in gay porn. And I think the idea was they were mostly trying to put those performers together. But again, there wasn't really a testing practice.
What about sepsis? Do you know anything about sepsis in the industry? No. Okay, so many young people out there might think that porn performances are natural and effortless. What would you say to them about some of the reality behind that? I mean, you've already spoken a little bit about the erectile drugs, but yeah, is there anything else that you want to?
I mean, it's again, all of it's a performance
Yeah,
first and foremost. It's not like there were any porn scenes where I just was doing what I felt good. It's like it's not like every porn scene I did was a fucking disaster. Some of it was fun. I mean, I'll be completely honest. If you happen to be on set with someone you're attracted to and they actually are attracted to you back and it's an easy thing, it can be a fun day. But yeah, the majority, especially with like higher production porn being, because there's like so many things you just don't think about. Like they have to do all these photographs. So it's usually like, you've never met this person in your life. You show up and before you do the sex scene, because they don't want her makeup ruined or whatever, you have to kind of pose through all of the sex positions for the still photographs. I mean, that's, I think, one of the major reasons, first and foremost, that every guy is on erectile dysfunction meds, because you're basically like standing there, you jerk off for a few seconds, and pause, and then have to kind of be in these whatever positions. And then, yeah, you have to, like, it depends. Like, some scenes can last 4 hours plus with stops and starts in between. And some of them are only 20, 30 minutes. But it's very factory oriented, meaning like a lot of the companies that I would work for, even which were just doing like sex only scenes, it's based on like they have a company that says like the scene has to be this long, we want this many positions, each position needs to last this many minutes. And as a guy, if you have a relationship with a company, you're usually the one running the scene in a way because they can hire you more often, so you develop like a relationship with the directors. And oftentimes we had like sort of visual cues where they would say like, oh, okay, now it's time to move on to the next thing or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's silly to think of in some ways.
Can I just take you
Yeah,
back? Because you said, some days you quite were attracted to the performer that you had to work with. Were there
sure,
some days that you really weren't attracted and you didn't have
of
any
course.
vibe? And how was that? How did that feel?
I mean, it just feels, I don't know, it feels like you're doing, it just becomes like a boring or bad kind of, I don't know, boring. It's still work. So it's like it becomes a form of athleticism that's just about getting through it or whatever.
Right.
And I think that's probably more common than the opposite. But again, in the middle of it, if you're in this and this is your job, you're kind of just like, well, this is what I do. Like it doesn't matter who's in front of me. Um, so I was not, yeah, I mean, some days you feel, I don't know. Sometimes you're really not attracted to that person and it feels weird. It just kind of feels gross at the end of the day. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. And in your personal view, do you think the industry I can't get my word out.
Traits.
Not perpetrates.
Oh, okay.
That's not what I said. I'm going to say it in a
Perpetuates?
completely different way. So,
Okay.
in your view, does the industry promote harmful stereotypes around women and sexuality? Obviously, in gay porn, maybe I don't know how that would play out, but how's your feelings about everything?
Promote harm. I mean, I don't 100% know how to answer that. I mean, probably,
I
but
think I think the UK at the moment there was a survey done in November, and I think it's 55% of young people are now experiencing or per participating in strangulation,
oh, right.
and that is increased because of that
Because
activity
of porn.
in
I mean,
porn.
I believe that, right? Because you're seeing, where else are you seeing that as a young person? Again, I'm not explicitly against like most things that people want to do on a consensual level. I think porn, obviously, on a cultural level, like sort of maybe pushes you down a path of experimenting with things like that. And certainly if you're young, too young to understand what that is. I mean, that's to me, the real problem is like, porn is supposed to be for adults, and
Yeah.
that's always the argument from the porn industry. And
Right.
yet we're too far down the rabbit hole of like this is not ever going to retract. Like even when I was in high school, we had internet porn, but I remember you had to wait like an hour to download 10 seconds. And so this wasn't like you were just on your phone streaming an infinite amount of anything you want to
And
see.
now
Yeah.
guys or girls can have numerous screens going feed. Yeah. So
I mean, I just think this is like apocalyptic. I mean, when I say this to men, again, a lot of information out there on the harms against women, but when I think of the rising statistics, I'm sure you're aware of this, of erectile porn-related erectile dysfunction in young men. I mean, that's apocalyptic to me. This is getting like into the 20th percentile under some research about like men under the age of 18 or something like that who don't have the experience of a physically intimate relationship with a woman or man, whoever they're attracted to, and are chronically addicted to pornography. And this is like ruining your brain and your ability to have sexual intimacy. I mean, and so again, it's like, what is the point of sex to you? Is it to be like attached to your phone? I mean, that's insane. I think that's to me that, and when we also talk about this rise of like OnlyFans and all this stuff, I mean, again, I'm not like fuck people in porn. They're doing their best to get by, and a lot of them aren't going to know that it's until they're in for a few years, and it's like then you're kind of stuck, or you take a tremendous amount of effort to get out. But it's like I was talking to this acquaintance of mine who does it, and this is that flip-flops on whether she feels like this she wants to do this or not, and oftentimes it's like she feels stuck, which I think is a pretty common opinion of people who are in the adult industry, especially after a few years, like they just don't know how to get out. She's telling me like any person on OnlyFans who is relatively popular, meaning like a decent amount of income is coming in, they don't physically have the ability to respond to all these people. So I don't think men understand, if you subscribe to a porn star's account, you are talking, you're talking to a variety of managers, and this is creating this whole new weird industry where she has software hooked up to her account where she hires women and men in the Philippines who work in these data centers where they're doing essentially like digital sweatshop labor, working for like $3 an hour, just talking, like sexting guys around the world. I mean, it's insane. It's just this environment where like you're ruining real relationships to have the most bizarre, like just think about millions of men around the world are logging in to be like, I'm chatting with my favorite porn star, and they're chatting with like some person living in poverty who is now forced to do this in like a third world country. I just think it's just a fucking stupid reality. But I don't know. I don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle at this point. It's like this is like prostitution has existed for all of humanity. Now we have technology in the mix, and it's just like,
Yeah, I mean that's the next thing, isn't it? AI porn and deep
yeah,
fakes and yeah, it's but now you're out, how
yeah.
do you feel about porn overall? Do you consume it yourself now, or has your perspective entirely shifted?
I mean, this is relatively new for me because I got in. I don't consume it at all anymore, and I'm a little bit of a hypocrite. I'll just say here, I have two clients who I still work for in the adult industry. Um, and I don't have a great rationale as to why, is except there are people behind those companies who I have relationships with. I'm a motion designer professionally. I went to film school, paid for it with porn, continued editing it, did my damnedest to get out, and I fired 90% of my adult clients in 2021. And it was very difficult for me to figure out how to get to the next stage of life. But I mostly have, like, I work for companies like Google, Microsoft, Netflix, and I make graphics. And so one of the companies I work for in the adult industry, I do graphics for like an awards show.
That's just brought a question into my mind. Do you get paid more in the porn industry for certain things more than others? Do you know what I mean? Do you get paid more if you do more risky things, or is it a standard fee?
Uh, I mean, so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like as the person who is getting fucked, meaning if you're the woman in straight porn or a man in gay porn, you're getting more money if it's like anal, you're getting more money if there are more people. Like if it's a threesome, you're probably getting more money than a one-on-one. You're getting more money if it's six guys, obviously. Um, so yeah, it raises based on kind of the amount of stuff happening in the scene. For a man, especially in straight porn, though, I think it kind of goes the opposite way. They often get like very cheap guys to do something like a blow bang where there are a bunch of men standing around, and the woman has to perform oral sex on them. Yeah, I don't know. Yes.
Do you think that porn provides a healthy depiction of sexual energy or sexuality? Why or why not? And what alternatives would you suggest for exploring healthy sexuality if you don't feel that that's healthy?
Well, I mean, if we're to speak broadly, probably no. I'm sure there are examples. Because again, I don't think it's like inherently filming people have sex is this negative thing. It's about, as an industry, I mean, I don't think you can help but for this to go into like a dark place or a place where this is at least not real or any positive depiction of sexuality, because you're just now, it's like anything else these days. I mean, you're algorithmically creating stuff to work for whatever desire or need is out there, and there's certainly a lot of people who want to see like the worst thing in the world, so people are going to make that. For me, I just have noticed this. The reason I stopped watching porn, first and foremost, is after going through a few years of therapy around it, I was just like, I can't be around this stuff on a regular basis. And when I have watched it consistently in the context of a relationship, I find that it diminishes my sex drive and it makes me feel less, um, how do I say this? I feel like I'm consciously less in tune with my partner if I'm regularly consuming porn. And I don't like that. And also right now, I just, because of my relationship to it, I don't find a lot of positives around it, and I'm not interested in consuming it anymore.
So if you could give advice to a young person either considering entering the industry or they're heavily consuming porn, what would you say to potentially warn them? Or if you could maybe go back to your younger self, is there anything you would have liked to have known or
Well,
be aware of?
yeah, I mean, I think specifically talking to young men, I'll say this, it's like I think probably you're not going to fucking listen to me because if you're a young man, you don't. I mean, I wouldn't listen to anyone saying this to me when I was 16, 17, 18 because you're like, especially someone who's 40 years old to be like, fuck you. But look, you do this on a regular basis, especially chronically watch porn, your risk of erectile dysfunction increases. Your risk of just having a positive, intimate sexual relationship, which hopefully is what you want in life. I think that's actually a good thing. We should be promoting the sexuality of young people. I think there's a good driving force in society. If you put all of that energy into porn and gooning and whatever dumb shit people are doing on the internet these days, I mean, I don't know. I just think about this from a completely selfish perspective. Why do you want to be 23 years old and you can't get an erection with a woman? I think this is that sounds like a terrible idea to me, and I think a lot of that has to do with our porn consumption these days. The rest of it, the ethics of what happens on set, I don't think is going to detract anyone personally. I think you can take that into consideration, but I think that's the same thing as being like, don't eat factory farmed meat. It has no real effect on society. So,
Okay, so finally, I think we've covered everything, Christopher. You've given me so much information and you've said such a lot. Have you got any views around how parents should address this with their child, or do you think that because sex is quite a taboo subject, isn't it?
yeah.
It's one of those things that we don't go there, we don't talk about it, and so we just pretend it's not happening and we'll wipe it under the carpet. And I'm kind of talking about the elephant in the room here and I'm trying to make a difficult conversation easier for parents and for young people, because I know in England it's okay to have all this unacceptable banter around sex, but to have an empowered, respectful, open conversation about it, it's like, oh my God, I can't do that, you know? So I'm shifting that and I'm kind of trying to bring the gravitas of sexual energy back. You know, it is the most beautiful God-given pleasure. It's something that's that powerful. It's created every one of us and it needs to be respected in that way. So, yeah, is there anything you kind of like say to parents?
I mean, look, again, this sounds like sort of like old man talk, but if I had a child, which I had intended to and still intend to, I would keep them off their phone for as long as humanly possible. Because once you give your kid the phone, I mean, if they're in middle school, as I remember being in middle school, there's a natural curiosity around sex. I mean, you can't prevent that in your children if they're that type of person. But, I think to the degree that you can, it's just like how, I mean, I know you're a parent, correct? What do you do with your kids at a certain age? I mean, they're
Well,
going to be
he's
interested in this.
my son's 10 and he's coming into the danger zone
Yeah.
now. So I have kind of talked to him and said, you know, sexual energy makes you feel good.
Right.
And certain images that you see will make you feel good. But if they're the wrong images, there'll be a bit of shame tied in with that. And
Right.
shame, Dr. Brené Brown says, is the fear of not being good enough for connection. So instantly, you're feeling like you're not quite good enough. So use your sexual energy really wisely because it's the most beautiful thing that you have, and keep it precious until you're ready to share that with somebody when you get older.
I think that's spot on. I don't know how you stop your son at 13 years old from watching porn. That is a very, I don't have an answer to that. Um,
I know
I
because it's quite tied into a lot of procreative hormones, the dopamine of porn, isn't it? So going through that, your brain on porn. So it is a challenge, but I think hearing stories like yours, Christopher, and other things that I'm putting out, having education around it so that they can make more ethical and informed choices around it. You know, that is this something that they actually want to be engaged with? How's it going to make them feel in 5 years, 10 years? Or how are they going to feel if they have a healthy relationship with somebody and they're having healthy sexual energy? They're not having any erectile problems. You know, it's yeah. So it's just guide. I think it's guiding them. Yeah.
I
Anyway,
mean, in my opinion, and I think the research is starting to suggest this, is the more you consume porn, it diminishes your capacity for real real human sexual relationships. But I think it's complicated because of this, because I think it's like any addiction thing. You can point to a large population of people who consume alcohol and have functional lives. And then you can point to a large percentage of people who are straight up addicts and have destroyed their lives as a result. And I think you could point the same thing with pornography. And
yeah,
so there are always going to be defenders who say, well, you know, most people casually consume porn and that's fine. And maybe to some degree they're right. But I think most people probably privately can distinguish immediately whether or not they have an issue. But I think, like you said, there's a lot of shame around it. I think a lot of people, those people are not going to talk about it if you spend multiple hours a day watching porn. But if you want a relation, if you want a relationship with somebody else, it's certainly a sexual one. I don't know that that's helping you out. As women, I have less insight, but for men, I mean, just on a really physiological level, I don't think that's good for you. It's literally rewiring your brain and the way that you are aroused. I mean, if that's just from looking at this and constantly like you have access to a new person every 5 seconds or whatever you're looking for, I mean, it just totally cognitively screws you up. And I would hope that most young men are interested in actually having a sexual relationship with, you know, if you're straight with a woman, if you're gay with a man, etc. But I would assume you would like, at the very least, to be able to have an erection with that person so you can explore all the great parts of sexuality. And if you're just freaking out in your head or imagining other things or like,
yeah. You're not really being present, and you're not bringing that real connection in, and that real connection and that real touch can make your energy expand, heal, grow you, whereas dysfunctional energy just can shut you down and make you a lot smaller than you should be. So I'd just like to thank you so much for your time and your wisdom, and that you've shared such a lot of amazing facts, things that I hadn't thought about, and thank you.
absolutely. I hope it was worth it, whatever. But thanks for talking with me and have a great rest of your day.